terrifying discovery. James Webb Telescope exposes a cursed ancient structure at the universe's edge. The news blared across screens and flooded social media. A structure, a vehement echo of something dark and terrible, was discovered hovering in space. The James Webb Telescope had detected it. It was grand, it was foreboding, and it heralded a curse woven into tribal legends whispered in the dead of night. Sarah's heart raced as she locked eyes on the flashing image of the ominous structure, her heart thumping in time with her children's soft snores emanating from the other room. The curse was real, and it was closer than she ever imagined. The shadows in her home deepened as the night wore on. The walls creaked, releasing unsettling melodramas of echoes. Sarah rubbed her temples, struggling to block out the prickling fear. The world outside felt different. It felt alien, eerie. Every rustle of a leaf sent chills down her back. Was it just the news, or was something wrong? It was then she heard it, a scratching sound, sharp and relentless, scraping against the drywall like claws seeking a way in. "Mommy, I feel funny," her eldest, Maddie, murmured, her dark eyes wide, reflecting unease. "I don't want to sleep. I think we're being watched." The tremor in her voice clutched at Sarah's heart. The legends and myths she had dismissed were creeping into her life, poisoning her fragile routine. She took a deep breath, fighting the instinct to give in to panic. She forced a smile. "It's just the wind, sweetie." But as she tucked them in, strange symbols appeared in the dust on the floor. Dust that she had cleaned just days ago, curling into shapes that made the hair on her arms stand at attention. Her phone buzzed with frantic rings from neighbors, worried about the current economic tremors, but tonight, there was a different kind of fear threading through their voices. Their usual banter turned into vague discussions about the strangeness of the recent discoveries. Moments like these rooted her more firmly in a cocoon of isolation. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As darkness seeped through the windows, the atmosphere in the house thickened. Yesterday's comfort turned sour, as a creeping terror settled in her bones. The scratching continued, more insistent. She could almost hear whispers in those sounds. Every tick of the clock shifted her closer to a crescendo of dread. Then came the hardest blow, her children's voices, faint and drifting from outside. "Mommy! Come play!" they cried, as if drawn by an invisible string. Heart racing, Sarah bolted to the door. Panic surged within her, muscles coiling tight. That simple backyard they often played in now was twisted into something monstrous. The air stilled, thick with shadows that danced in the corners of her vision. The neighborhood, once familiar and safe, now loomed with unrecognizable forms. She stepped outside, breath hitching. Each shadow cast in the dim glow of the streetlights became a throbbing knot in her gut. The forgotten charms of her community faded into a disorienting maze of dread. In a neighbor's yard, blurred figures stood, watching, their faces distorted yet achingly familiar. It clicked in her mind, this was no mere curse from the cosmos. It weaved a tapestry of betrayal from those she thought she could trust. And in that liminal moment between terror and understanding, a voice, soft yet suffocating, called her name in the dark. What would she do now? The stakes of her fragile world swirled around her like a storm, and all she could feel was the crushing weight of isolation, fear, and the unnameable horror that awaited her. Sarah stood frozen at the threshold, her breath caught in her throat. The chill of night pressed against her skin, tightening like a vice. The faint whisper of her children's voices, now a siren call echoing through the darkness, twisted her insides. Every bone in her body screamed for her to retreat back into the safety of her home, but her instincts were muddled. Fear isn't always clear. "Maddie! Ethan! Stop!" she shouted, desperation slicing through her voice. But they did not stop. They were laughing now, that innocent giggle turning into something near hysterical, taunting, beckoning. It twisted her stomach into knots. Why couldn't she see them? Where were they? Hard hammering, Sarah stepped onto the lawn, the grass damp beneath her feet. Shadows danced crazily, flickering with the dim light. The figures standing in her neighbor's yard seemed to pulse, watching her with vacant, hollow eyes. She forced herself to breathe, to think, but the air felt thick, heavy with unspeakable dread. Maddie! Ethan! Where are you? Panic twisted her voice higher. Silence hung like a blade waiting to drop. Then, there it was again. The scratching, now accompanied by an unsettling scratching laughter that danced around her, sending cold tendrils creeping up her back. She turned toward the sound and the world exploded into a kaleidoscope of shadows and whispers. They pulled her in, an invitation to madness lurking just at the edge of her vision. She squinted, desperately trying to pierce through the dark. And there, just between a dim light and the all-enveloping blackness, she saw their figures. Maddie and Ethan, standing together, their backs turned toward her, facing a tree she couldn't recognize. The branches twisted grotesquely, blackened and knotted like clenched fists. The bark shimmered, pulsing with a strange energy that drew her gaze in, like a moth to a flame. Footsteps shuffled behind her, too light, too breathy she could feel the breath of something not quite there, something that shouldn't inhabit this world. The distorted figures in the yard began to shift closer, gliding rather than walking, with open mouths that seemed to stretch and contort in sounds she couldn't comprehend. Help us! Maddie's voice crackled like static, distant and broken. Sarah's heart sank. This wasn't her daughter's voice. This was something else altogether. With a surge of adrenaline, she bolted toward them, but her feet felt like lead. Just as she reached for them, an unseen force slammed against her, knocking her to the ground. Pain shot through her shoulder. Choking back tears, she twisted to see what had blocked her path. There, at the edge of her vision, a deeper blackness loomed, a shadow that pulsated as if it were alive. It drew closer, an ancient malevolence, and she once again heard that haunting whisper calling her name. Sarah, the weight of realization crushed her. This wasn't an ordinary nightmare. This was the darkness itself responding to the structure revealed in the cosmos, reaching through the veil of reality, and finding her, unearthing every fear she had ever swallowed. The neighborhood was emptying. She could see the distant flicker of headlights, the last signs of life. This was no longer just about her children. It was about the curse unraveling, infecting everything it touched. She had to decide: fight or flee? As she scrambled to her feet, a claw of shadow darted from the darkness. It brushed against her arm, sending waves of ice through her veins. She screamed, and in that instant, the shadows pulsed hungrily. Before her stood a vision of both terror and truth, and she knew she had to face it if she ever hoped to see her children again. What if the very act of standing against it brought more than she bargained for? The shadows loomed closer, their twisted forms writhing like serpents hungry for an offering. Sarah's breath quickened, each inhalation filled with the metallic taste of fear as she backed away. The once familiar ground felt foreign and fraught with hidden horrors. Something had shifted in the fabric of reality, an eerie crack running through the night. Maddie! Ethan! Her voice was hoarse now, raw and desperate. The faces she yearned to see remained obscured, two blurry figures locked in the embrace of the tree. Their laughter changed, morphing into shrill cries that echoed through the chilling air, vibrating in her bones. She staggered to their side, fighting against the mounting pressure of the shadows that pressed around her. The pulsating darkness matched the rhythm of her frantic heartbeat. With trembling hands, she reached out, ready to grasp her children. But as her fingers brushed against them, a searing jolt shot through her, sending her reeling back into the damp earth. This wasn't her garden anymore. As she lay there, the world around her tilted and shifted. Buildings warped, taking on grotesque shapes. The silence felt alive, thick and oppressive, almost joyful in its malicious anticipation. The shadows sang to her, a haunting melody laced with madness, promising knowledge that could shatter her fragile sanity. Maddie, Ethan, this isn't funny. The words felt like a prayer, desperate and pitiful. Yet behind her, the scratching laughter crescendoed. The voices had transformed into a cacophony, mocking, jeering, clawing at her mind. Suddenly, a figure broke from the crowd of shadows. It was familiar. A silhouette with long hair, indistinguishable yet achingly known. Sarah's heart plummeted. No. It was her own reflection, a doppelganger grinning unnaturally wide, eyes glinting like shards of broken glass. "Join us, Sarah," it crooned, the voice a grotesque mimicry of her own. "Your children need you, set them free." Around her, the shadows danced, swirling and intertwining, pulling her towards the darkness. The tree behind them pulsed ominously, its bark seeming to shift and breathe. Tendrils of blackness slithered up its trunk, reaching towards her. "No, I want tea." The enormity of her heartache surged up, igniting a flicker of defiance. Mustering all her strength, Sarah propelled herself forward, crashing into her reflection, hoping to shatter the twisted vision. The impact sent a shockwave out, radiating through the shadows like ripples in water. They shrieked, a mix of anguish and surprise. For a moment, the darkness hesitated, recoiling as if stung. Sarah turned, desperate again to find her children. But they were still there, just beyond her reach, eyes vacant and pleading. "Help us," they echoed faintly, their voices barely audible beneath the turmoil. Just then, a piercing wail sliced through the night, resonating from the tree. Roots erupted from the ground, sprawling like claws, taking hold of her ankles and yanking her back. The shadows swirled, drawing tighter around her. In her mind, Sarah wrestled with a terrifying thought: was the tree truly alive? Was it feeding off her despair, growing stronger with every struggle? Panic clawed inside her throat as she fought against the roots, but it was no use. They held her fast, a vice grip made of nightmares. "You can't save them without making the ultimate sacrifice," a voice whispered, sultry and dark, wrapping around her heart. Terror flooded her veins, tightening its grip. Was her love for her children worth the price she had to pay? Just as despair threatened to swallow her whole, a piercing scream shattered the darkness, coming from both not her children and from movement caught deep within the black. Was there another presence, something she hadn't noticed before? What if the true horror wasn't the shadows themselves, but what lay hidden within? All she could do was scream, not knowing if it was for Maddie, for Ethan, or for her own sanity. The shadows closed in, encasing her in a suffocating darkness that promised revelations unfit for light. With all of it closing in, Sarah braced herself for what was to come next. She had to know what terrible truths awaited her in the heart of the dark. The darkness thickened, a palpable entity that pulsed and shifted around Sarah like a living nightmare. Roots dug deeper into her skin, a cold grip that sent waves of icy dread through her. She choked back a cry, feeling as though each heartbeat echoed in tandem with the writhing shadows. "Maddie! Ethan!" The names burst from her lips, a desperate prayer lost in the void. The shadows responded, a cacophony of whispering doubts sweeping past her ears. Sarah's breath came in frantic gasps, mixing with the tang of damp earth and decay that filled her nostrils. Somewhere, deep within the shadows, a figure writhed, its anguished form blurring in and out of sight. With a renewed surge of panic, she wrenched against the roots, fighting to free herself. They tugged back, relentless, like barbed wire searching for flesh. The world around her twisted further, the tree behind her contorting into a grinning monster, a dark smile stretching wide, promising torment. "Set them free," the voice from before echoed again, coaxing and taunting. It surrounded her completely, consuming her thoughts like smoke from a fire. "What are you willing to give?" "Just a little blood, a little fear." The shadows shifted further, revealing glimpses of her children, but their forms flickered and distorted, faces melting into grotesque mimicries. Their eyes were wide, filled with terror that clawed at her soul. "Mom! Help us!" A pair of tiny voices cried, but beneath the surface she heard something else, a guttural growl that danced with their cries. "No!" she exclaimed, shaking her head violently, tears streaming down her cheeks. "This isn't real." But deep in her gut, she felt the truth unfurling, bitter and heavy. With a sheer force of will, she launched herself against the enchanted roots, slashing through the thick underbrush of shadow. The sudden rush of pain was a grim reminder of her reality. Casting frantic glances toward her children, she noticed something glimmering in the shadows, a shard of light piercing through, a singular point illuminating the chaos. Sarah the doppelganger spoke once more, its smile stretched impossibly wide. Embrace this darkness. Let go. With a surge of hope, Sarah lunged toward the light, struggling against the roots that curled tighter around her. She felt them tear at her skin but pressed on, agony igniting a primal determination. Mom! Save us! The voices were clearer now, pleading for her not to surrender. The shimmering light called to her, illuminating a narrow escape route. If she could just reach it, a sudden crack split through the air, a thunderous sound that made her heart race. The figure inside the shadows howled, exploding with rage as the roots quivered in fear. The trees shuddered violently, branches snapping violently like bones amid the chaos. Sarah's heart sank. They're angry! We have to move! She yelled, adrenaline coursing through her veins. In a moment of sheer clarity, she transitioned from fear to fierce determination, wrenching free of the root's grip. With every ounce of strength, she bolted toward the light. But the shadows surged ahead of her, a tempest of darkness ready to ensnare her again. The voice intensified, wrapped in malice, "You must choose, Sarah. Leave the light, or leave your children." Torn between despair and hope, she hesitated just for a moment, heart racing with the weight of her choice. There, in the center of the darkness, a shriek echoed, unmistakable. It was her children's cry, cutting through the chaos, sharp and desperate. Determined, she shot toward the light, knowing that whatever lay ahead would demand everything: her mind, her soul, her sanity. Just as she crossed into the brightness, a searing pain shot through her back, crashing through her senses. The shadows howled in agony, voices overlapping into a pure chaos. What had she unleashed? The scream of the tree pulsed in her ears as she stumbled forward, the light enveloping her whole. Just as she thought she had escaped, something icy wrapped around her ankle, pulling her back into a familiar scream. What had she left behind in the dark? The cold seeped through Sarah's skin as the icy grip tightened around her ankle. Panic surged like fire in her veins. She kicked and struggled, but it was no use. The darkness roared in defiance of her will. The light, so bright a moment ago, flickered as if it was losing its battle against the shadows encasing her. "Mom!" The voices echoed again, now muffled but desperate, tugging at her heartstrings. Tears streamed down her cheeks, hot against the chill closing in around her. She couldn't let this be the end. Not like this. In a frantic scramble, she clawed at the root binding her. Her fingers felt raw against the rough bark, and with each pull, jagged pain shot through her, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Not when her children's cries rang louder, a choral plea for salvation drowning out the whispers of the dark. Suddenly, the snare about her ankle released, and she tumbled into the blinding light. It enveloped her, a warmth filling her lungs and beating back the cold dread that had held her in its grip. For a moment, she lay gasping, heart thudding furiously. But the reprieve was short-lived. The ground trembled as she pushed herself up. The light around her began shrinking, folding in like a dying star. Shadows surged forward like a wave, threatening to wash over her again, swallowing any semblance of hope. She sprinted forward, feet pounding against the damp earth, shadows clawing at her heels. Willow branches stretched out like ghostly arms, swiping at her as she dashed past. But her focus was on one thing: her children's voices reaching her from somewhere ahead, distorted yet still full of love. Each scream ignited her adrenaline, aching in her chest like a wound that refused to heal. "Hold on!" she shouted into the abyss, trying to reassure them and herself. But the dark was relentless. It breathed, it surged. And then, she saw it, a dilapidated structure rising amidst the chaos. Beams of rotting wood loomed, piercing upward like fingers grasping for light. With every instinct screaming, she dashed toward it. As she neared, the air thickened, weighted down with sorrowful memories and whispered secrets. It felt both repulsive and inviting, a strange duality that made her hesitate. Could this house, this cursed remnant of the past, hold the key to her children? No time! she admonished herself, shaking the fear away. Clenching her teeth, she pushed through the creaking door, which opened with a painful groan, echoing through the stillness. Inside, the darkness felt tangible, like wet cloth wrapping her throat, making it hard to breathe. Muffled whispers surrounded her, flowing like an invisible tide. As her eyes adjusted, they landed on the remnants of life once lived here, photographs scattered on the floor, faces fading like memories lost. One picture caught her attention. It was of a little girl with familiar eyes, a grin so radiant it seemed to flicker with an otherworldly light. Maddie? But it wasn't just a picture, it pulsated, drawing her into its core, a gateway to that fragmented reality. As she reached for it, a voice erupted from the shadows, dark and ancient, a deep rumble that stirred her insides. Why do you seek what has been lost, Mother? With horror, she realized the voice was not just from the shadows but was embedded deep within her memory. Maddie! Ethan! The names twisted in her mouth, desperate cries echoing against the walls of her mind. As the structure trembled, a surge of anger from the dark clashed against her hope. The wall behind her cracked, revealing the glimpses of a monstrous face, a hungry void of despair that wanted everything she held dear. In desperation, she grabbed the picture, believing it could somehow save them. But as she did, the shadows erupted, revealing a figure, a grotesque reflection of herself, corrupted and cackling, whispering the one truth she feared: nothing you do will change the fate that awaits. In that moment, time froze as realization set in. She was not only fighting for her children, she was battling an entity that mirrored her own fears and desires. What sacrifices will she have to make to set them free? Fingers trembling against the photograph, she braced herself for the answer. The moment her fingers brushed the photograph, the air grew heavy, pressing down like thick fog. A shiver ran through Sarah, igniting an instinctual dread as the otherworldly cackling burrowed deep into her mind. She clutched the picture tightly, the sharp edges digging into her palm, drawing blood. It stung, but she welcomed the pain, anything to break the trance of the creature made in her reflection. Sarah, the voice crooned, laced with a mocking familiarity that sent chills dancing along her spine. The figure loomed closer, shadowy limbs reaching toward her, and snaring her with the tendrils of her own guilt. You think you can save them? Where were you when they cried for you? The darkness around her pulsated, wild with energy, and for a fleeting instant she was back in her home. Laughter echoed through the air, intertwining with sweet memories of family dinners and bedtime stories. It was intoxicating yet suffocating. A serpent of nostalgia coiled around her heart, squeezing, reminding her of every moment she had let slip away. No! She screamed, fighting back against the wave of despair. I won't let you take them from me. With desperation blooming in her chest, she flung the photograph to the floor, watching as it fluttered away, landing beneath the gaze of the grotesque figure that reflected her. The creature, with its hollow eyes and twisted smile, merely paused, curious, then let out a screech of laughter so visceral it felt like acid against her skin. Boldness won't protect you, it rasped, a forked tongue slithering between stained teeth. You think this house can save them? It's a tomb, a collection of lost souls. As if to mock her, the house emitted a terrible groan, shaking on its foundations. Cracks spread across the walls like veins, pulsating with an unseen heartbeat, a dreadful reminder of all that was lifeless around her. Enough! She barked, rallying her resolve. But the tendrils of doubt crept back, whispering to her that she was already too late. The walls of the house shifted, morphing into a dark labyrinth, every twist and turn leading her further from reality and closer to the abyss. Determined, she tore her gaze from the creature and tried focusing on the space around her, searching for a way out. The whispers grew louder, wrapping around her legs like iron chains. Shadows undulated, creating shadows of their own, and she began to feel her vision narrowing as though the darkness was eager to swallow her whole. Maddie! Ethan! She cried out again, desperation lacing her voice. Please hold on. In response, a soft light flickered from the depths of the shadows, barely noticeable yet undeniably there. It pulsed softly, steady like a heartbeat. Could it be them? She couldn't tell. All she knew was that hope clashed violently against the ever-encroaching void. She pushed forward, her feet moving almost instinctively toward that flicker. The grotesque figure let out a guttural roar, the sound echoing through the chambers of the accursed house, vibrating with rage and malice. But she took no heed, fueled only by the love for her children. As she neared the light, its glow intensified, illuminating her path. The shadows shrieked, recoiling as if in pain, trying desperately to pull her back. But Sarah anchored herself, grounding her determination like steel. She stretched her hand out toward the light. Suddenly, a bone-chilling yell reverberated, shaking her to the core. It wasn't just a cry of hate, it felt like a scream of agony. And then the walls began to collapse, an avalanche of darkness tumbling towards her like a tidal wave, hungry and filled with rage. "Mother, let go!" A familiar voice, Maddie's voice, cried out. In that moment, she had a choice. Hold on, or risk everything to save them. The shadows encircled her tighter, and as her heart thundered against her ribcage, she realized the truth. To free her children, she might have to let herself be swallowed whole. Would she be strong enough to face the darkness of her own making? The weight of that question pressed heavily in the air. She felt the walls close in. And with a desperate breath, she chose to leap into the light. But what if that light was nothing but another trick? The light enveloped her, blinding and cold. For a brief moment, Sarah felt weightless, floating through an expanse that seemed endless. But then reality slammed back into her with brutal force. She landed hard on a wooden floor, splintering pain shooting through her limbs. Lurching to her feet, she was met with a vast, empty room. It was dim, like night had seeped into the very cracks of the walls. Old photographs lined the room. They were all of her smiling at birthday parties, posing on summer vacations, unaware of the shadows creeping at the edges. An icy claw of dread gripped her throat. "Where are you, Maddie?" "Ethan?" she called, but her voice echoed back, swallowed by the silence. The laughter that had once filled these rooms seemed to haunt her now, twisted and mocking. She stepped forward hesitantly, her knees trembling. Each creak of the old floorboards felt like a gunshot, loud and intrusive. Shadows moved with a life of their own, folding into corners and slipping beneath furniture. The air was thicker now, thick with rotting memories and despair she couldn't shake. Then she noticed that a door, partially ajar, a sliver of light escaping through the crack. Hope surged within her as she rushed to it, pushing it open with a shaky palm. Beyond was a long hallway shrouded in fog. The light she had spotted now flickered like a failing heartbeat, drawing her in. But just as she began to step out, a cry pierced the air. "M.O.M. Help!" It was Maddie's voice. Raw, desperate. Sarah's heart raced. "Maddie!" She bolted down the hallway, the flicker of light becoming her only focus. The walls whispered secrets, their voices slithering around her like living entities. They called her name, beckoned her closer to the abyss. "Get away from her!" she yelled, images of her children's faces flooding her mind among flashes of their laughter and love. As she reached the end of the hallway, she found herself standing before a door, even larger than the last. The light danced beneath it, enticing, yet it felt like a heartbeat, the kind that could stop at any moment. In that moment, everything felt wrong. Suddenly, the floor beneath her quaked. She staggered back. A low growl rumbled from behind the door, rich with malice, like a predator ready to pounce. "You really think you can save them? They're mine now." Sarah's gut twisted with terror. Was that the grotesque figure? "Shut up!" she screamed. But the growl only grew louder, echoing through the corridor as it shook the very foundation of the house. She pressed her hands against the door, but it held fast, cemented to the threshold of whatever horrors lay within. "Please let them go. I swear. I'll do anything." On cue, the whispers turned to laughter, the kind that might come from the depths of hell. The door rattled violently, and Sarah stumbled to her knees, heart racing, blood pounding in her ears. Suddenly, silence fell, heavy and dense, the growls fading. A voice, softer now, slithered across the threshold. "Do you know what you've awakened? Do you remember why you lost them?" Her thoughts raced back to the choices she made, the moments she ignored. Her breath quickened as she realized how right the voice might be. The truth flashed before her like an unwelcome ghost. Each moment she had chosen work over family, each argument left unresolved, it could all be coming to consume her. But she couldn't give up. Not now. With a surge of adrenaline, she grabbed the doorknob, yanking hard. The door gave way with a violent crash, light spilling forth like the dawn that would never come. And then she was face to face with the darkness beyond. "Maddie! Ethan!" She shouted again, her voice a wild appeal against the encroaching shadows. But it was not the sweet faces of her children that emerged. Instead, an endless void stared back at her, swirling with threats and promises of despair. "Join us," it whispered, seductive and sinister, heart pounding, terror clawing at her throat. Sarah had one last chance. Would she step into that yawning darkness, risking everything to save her children? As the shadows lunged forward, she took a deep breath, memories of laughter filling her mind, and prepared to leap once more into the heart of fear. What awaited her among the shadows could be the end or the only way to save her family. The darkness surged, a living, breathing entity hungry for her essence. Sarah's heart threatened to burst as she held her breath, forcing herself not to retreat. The void beckoned her like a siren, its whispers promising reunion, salvation if only she would surrender. She couldn't. Not now. Before she could stop herself, she stepped forward into the maw of shadows. The instant her foot crossed the threshold, a chill struck her chest, like ice crawling through her veins. The shadows thickened, drowning out the flickering light from behind her. She gasped, feeling the weight of its suffocating dark wrap around her like a shroud. "Maddie! Ethan!" The names clawed their way out of her throat, desperate and raw. The air thickened. Every breath felt like inhaling shards of glass. Yet the whispers grew louder, morphing into fragments of laughter. She shut her eyes tightly, imagining her children's faces once more, pushing through the fear like a shield. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. The whispers turned more urgent, twisting into words she could almost understand. "Do you really want to find them?" They spoke together, a chorus in haunting harmony. "Stop!" Sarah shouted, but her voice trembled, fear washing over her. She stumbled onward, fighting against the oppressive weight of the darkness that gripped at her spirit. She could feel the ground changing beneath her feet, shifting from solid wood to clammy, soft earth that felt alive, wriggling beneath her, as if it wanted to swallow her whole. From somewhere deep within the shadow, a figure began to take shape, a grotesque image of twisted limbs and hollow eyes. It grinned, a mouth that shouldn't exist stretching uncomfortably wide. "You're here to play, aren't you?" It cooed, the voice oily and infectious, slithering into her mind. A flash of recognition struck her. It was a manifestation of everything she had ignored, the guilt, the sorrow, and the rage that had built over years. This was a reflection of her failings, the spirit of all the moments she let slip away, the times she had hidden in the chaos of life, leaving Maddie and Ethan behind. "Leave them alone!" she screamed, furious and desperate. The sound ricocheted through the air, and the figure recoiled, its grin faltering for just a beat. "Alone? You brought them to me. You did this!" It hissed, and in that cry, Sarah felt the very fabric of her soul being torn apart. A brilliant beam of light suddenly burst through the darkness, wrapping around her like a lifeline. In that moment, she could see her children. They were trapped in a shimmering web, faces pale and eyes wide with fear. "Mom!" they cried, their voices sweet and sharp, cutting through her despair like knives. "The only way to save them is to embrace the shadows," the figure taunted, its voice slithering around her, shifting like smoke. "Sacrifice what you love most." Heart racing, Sarah made a choice. She wouldn't abandon her children. Not even as the heavy darkness pressed closer, willing her to embrace the void. There had to be another way. She let the light grow within her, willing it to pierce through the shadows. In a moment filled with clarity, she shouted, "No! You don't own me! You don't own them!" The darkness shuddered. The wretched figure shrieked, a sound like metal scraping against stone. The air around her crackled with electricity. For the briefest moment, she felt the overwhelming presence of despair shake. "Fool!" it cried, but Sarah found strength rising inside her. She pushed against the encroaching shadows, willing light to break through the veil. The light surged, a wave of warmth that shattered the stillness. But just as it burst forth, the shadows lurched, reaching out like claws. Chaos ensued, and in that cacophony, Sarah felt herself being pulled back. She couldn't lose them again. "Hold on together!" she screamed, not just for her children, but for herself. And then the light vanished, plunging her back into the inky blackness. A whisper echoed around her, promising darkness and despair, echoing through her mind. Would she break beneath its weight, or find the strength to expose the truth behind the terror? As the shadows claimed her once more, the scream of the children pierced through her thoughts, a haunting reminder that fate was waiting to be reclaimed or lost forever. Sarah's resolve wavered as the shadows spiraled around her, cold and unforgiving. She felt them pressing in tighter, each foul tendril pulling at her skin like brambles. Panic thrashed inside her. She could no longer see her children's faces. All that echoed in her mind were their terrified cries, fading into the deafening silence. "Mom! Help!" came the desperate wails from somewhere within the darkness, further igniting her futility. She squeezed her eyes shut, the darkness whispering vile promises of surrender. "They're lost because of you," it hissed. "You let them down." "Stop!" she screamed, the word tearing from her throat raw and desperate. Yet another foundation of doubt slipped into her mind. What had she done? The parties, the distractions, the moments she turned away. "Embrace your fears," it crowed gleefully. "Join them in the abyss." Obsession clawed at her mind, making her feel light-headed. The chilling laughter swirled like a storm, and suddenly, her body betrayed her, wanting to collapse to the soft earth below. Yet just as she felt herself teetering, an internal spark erupted. She couldn't falter. "Not now. Enough!" she roared, clenching her fists until her nails dug into her palms. She envisioned the luminous bubble surrounding her children, a beacon amidst the encroaching darkness. She drew strength from that image and focused on it with everything she had. The shadows briefly recoiled, as if scared of her newfound determination. "Forward!" she shouted. "I will not be a prisoner of my past." She charged ahead, slamming into the encroaching darkness as light surged within her like molten fire. The grotesque figure writhed, its smile twisting into a snarl. "Do you think fighting will work? It's only the beginning." All of a sudden, she stumbled upon a bizarre clearing, a realm between realities. Wisps of shadow twisted around her like smoke, but before her stood a mirror, the surface shimmering like liquid silver. "Look into it," the figure crooned, its voice slick like oil. "Face the truth. Face the choices that led you here." Sarah hesitated, heart racing. Was this another trick? Would the mirror reflect her shame, her insecurities? A part of her wanted to turn and flee, to escape the relentless torment. Yet her children's faces lingered in her mind, anchoring her in place. Taking a shaky step closer, she leaned towards the reflective surface. Images swirled within it. Each moment she dismissed their laughter for phone calls, each time she withdrew into Netflix marathons instead of nurturing their spirits. Their smiles morphed into ghostly expressions of sorrow. They echoed silently, disappointment etched across their faces. "See?" the figure hissed, deriving pleasure from her anguish. "Where were you?" "No," she breathed, tears blurring her vision as regret washed over her like an unforgiving tide. The realization churned inside her, a cataclysm of pain and sorrow. She wasn't just fighting for her children anymore, she was fighting for herself. She had the power to change this. In that moment of clarity, she understood that the darkness fed on her guilt. It relished her fear. It fueled the very abyss that threatened to consume her whole. With renewed fervor, she shouted through her tears, "I want to be defined by failure." A shimmer of light blossomed from within her, sparking wildly. The shadows convulsed, shrieking as they recoiled from the fire of her defiance. Her children needed rescuing, but she had to save herself first. Just as her inner light threatened to break free, time suddenly seemed to splinter, a haunting rumble echoing through her senses. The mirror cracked, sending a shockwave through the clearing. "No! This is a trap!" The dark figure screeched, its form twisting into a grotesque mass as it lunged for her. Would she break free or be dragged down into eternal shadows? The echo of her children's voices crescendoed. "Mom!" Driven by love and desperation, Sarah dove into the light, ready for whatever awaited her on the other side. But what if the next step led her deeper into a darkness she could never escape? Sarah plunged into the brilliant light, feeling the warmth pierce through the shadows that had clung to her like a suffocating fog. For an instant, time suspended, encapsulating her in a moment of fragile hope. The light cradled her, promising solace and safety, wrapping around her limbs like a tender embrace. But the shadows were not far behind. Their relentless howls faded into despairing whispers as they sought to pull her back. "You'll always belong to us," they taunted, their voices slick with malice, echoing through the confusion. Determined not to yield, Sarah surged forward, her heart set on the flickering glow of her children's faces that now danced just beyond reach in the horizon of light. "Maddie! Ethan!" she called out, the name spilling from her like a prayer, each syllable fueled by love and fierce resolve. In that instant, as she dashed towards her children, memories of every sacrifice, every moment of doubt came rushing back. Sarah saw the faces of the people in her life, the friends she'd pushed aside, the laughter she had stifled beneath burdens. The guilt clenching at her heart squeezed tighter, but she fought against it. No more running. No more hiding. The warmth of the light grew brighter, swirling around her like a protective barrier. She could see it more clearly now, their silhouettes, illuminated by the brilliance surrounding her. But as she reached out to touch them, fear seized hold again. What if they were just another illusion crafted by the darkness, another trick to ensnare her heart forever? "No!" she shouted defiantly. "You won't control me. We are stronger than you." The words reverberated through her being, electrifying her resolve. She would not be a prisoner of her past, nor of this nightmarish struggle. In a sudden rush, the shadows shifted, reforming into the grotesque figure that had tormented her. "You think you can escape?" it shrieked, the voice dripping with contempt. "This is your fate. Accept it." But Sarah stood firm, heart racing with newfound courage. "No!" She lunged forward, her fingers brushing against the light. As she touched it, the energy exploded outward, a force so powerful, it shattered the darkness that coiled around her like a serpent. In a blinding flash, she was thrust into a kaleidoscope of brilliance. She stumbled through the shimmering barrier, breaking through with everything she had. The light enveloped her entirely, and for a heartbeat she glimpsed a vibrant world beyond the shadows, a world filled with cherished laughter and love. "Maddie! Ethan!" she cried desperately, and there they were, their faces brightened with warmth and affection, eyes sparkling with recognition. Sarah closed the distance in a heartbeat, enveloping them in her arms, overwhelmed with relief and joy. Their bodies were real, warm, and alive. Every ounce of despair fell away, replaced by an indescribable lightness. The strength of her love ignited a fire that brightened her heart. But then the shadows surged back, thrumming with anger. They twisted and bowed, seeking her once more, fueled by her fears. Sarah felt it. The darkness attempted to claw at her mind, threatening to pull her back. For a moment, doubts whispered a chilling refrain. "You can't save them. You don't deserve it." She held Maddie and Ethan tightly, grounding herself. "No!" she shouted, her voice echoing against the chaos. "I will fight for us." Hand in hand, the three of them took a step toward the blinding light, silencing the shadows with the power of their unity. Together, they pushed forward, defying whatever malevolence sought to tear them apart. "Stronger together," Maddie urged. "Always," Ethan chimed in, fear melting away into faith. The shadows roared in fury, struggling to maintain their grip, but Sarah felt an unstoppable force emanating from within her, a strength forged out of love and resilience. She envisioned a world free from fear and despair, filled with moments shared, laughter echoed, and warmth found in every embrace. With one final charge toward the light, the darkness recoiled, thrashing violently as its hold disintegrated, the anguished cries fading into the mists of forgotten despair. A kaleidoscope of colors swirled around them, restoring vitality to the air, lifting them higher and higher, until they burst forth into a new dawn, the first rays of morning flooding their senses, healing and invigorating. Breathless, Sarah emerged into the sunlight, her heart hammering in a wild rhythm. She looked at her children alive, safe. Relief flooded her soul, washing away the remnants of helplessness as they clung together, laughing in joyous disbelief. "What was that?" Maddie asked, wide-eyed, breaking the fragile silence. Sarah hugged them tighter, tears of gratitude spilling forth. "Just a bad dream we woke up from," she whispered, allowing the weight of their experience to settle. "And we will keep waking up together. Always." And with that, as the sun began to rise over the horizon, illuminating their world with hope, they stepped forward, ready to reclaim their lives, cherishing each flicker of joy and warmth that the shadows would never steal again. Now that you know how this gripping saga ends, you need to subscribe immediately. Don't miss out on more exclusive stories that'll keep you at the edge of your seat. Smash that like button now to show your support, and feed the algorithm so we can keep creating. Flood the comments section below with your reactions and theories about the ending. Let us hear what you think. And please, don't wait even one more second. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Only true fans understand how vital it is to support our channel through these actions.